We are getting ready to live stream. Okay, we are live streaming now.
Get we pay for it.
Wow.
Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon.
Hey,
Oh my gosh, it's not even morning. It's 1 o'clock. Wow. Hmm, Sorry.
This is starting off good.
Yeah.
I wish my day was just starting out. Yes. It feels like it's rolling into the next day. Um, it looks like we've got most of the commissioners here. Does anybody know if Betty was planning to join today?
As far as we know, yes.
Okay.
And I
We can
think
wait.
she said she was going to be in and out because she had a conflict today, but I thought she said she'd be on some and not on all the meeting now.
Cool. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? And if she pops in, that's
Okay.
totally fine.
Okay. You first.
All right. We'll go ahead and get started. Chair Hill, Director Coombs, members of the commission, J.R. Collier, Deputy Director, currently interim over Central Business Services, formerly over Deputy Director of Statewide Operations. So I think I'm going to be kicking off the first workshop topic, which is an update on our field operations, kind of how our structure works for our parks themselves, our units and that structure. So going to spend some time this afternoon going through that. I will start the presentation here in just a second. We'll preface it by saying you can stop at any time and ask questions or interrupt. It's a pretty straightforward presentation, so can do fine with interruptions as needed. So we will share and get this started. There's a couple animations, so I'm trying to be optimistic that the animations will work. Here. So really, as we talked about this, gonna do a presentation on our statewide field operations. This is really focused on the parks themselves. So not our central office functions, really the parks specifically. And so as I talk today, I'll kind of draw some of those distinctions and kind of go back and forth and compare maybe of what generally you maybe are more familiar with seeing as the commission, and then maybe some of the stuff you don't see as often as commissioners, but that are part of our operations. So breaking it down, you can see, things, the state of Oregon is broken into, as far as our operations go, three different regions, three distinct regions. And right now we have them broken up kind of geographically because we are straightforward people like that. And so we have the coastal region, which is as described right along the Oregon coast. The valleys region, which is there in the green shades, which really is the mid Willamette Valley, starting just south of Eugene, up north through the Willamette Valley and east down the Columbia River Gorge, just about to the Dalles. And then we have the mountain region, which is kind of south, central, and eastern Oregon broken into sections. So we'll expand as we go forward on this map and show the differences of those areas. All those little dots are state parks. So every time you see a dot, that's what it represents. So it shows kind of our geographic spread of our parks, and you can kind of see clusters. Before we get into it and further, and you'll see as the graphics go forward, the coast is our biggest collection of properties, both by visitation and usage, but also by the number of properties themselves. In addition to the state parks, we manage the entire beach. The entire Oregon coast is the Ocean Shore Recreation Area. So that has a user function, and then the properties themselves. So both as beach accesses or state parks or campgrounds. So that equates for the usage and income, and virtually almost every stat we track. The coast exceeds the other two regions combined. So it really shows where a lot of our visitors go, and a lot of the demand for parks is. Breaking down our map a little further geographically is we have those three distinct regions. Within each region, we have it broken into districts. And so the map highlighted kind of showing those district boundaries. On the coast, we have north, central, and south. Again, very simple. The valley, we get a little more creative and have named them the Columbia District, which is the northernmost district there in green, and then the Willamette District, which is the darker green shaded area. And then in the mountain region, we have the north central and south central districts, and then the eastern district. Kind of showing again that spread, and really these lines are kind of based on units, where I mentioned in the previous slide that the coast region sees more visitors and revenue. It's because that's not how we broke the lines. We actually have the dividing lines roughly based on the amount of park units and what we call a management unit, which is a cluster of parks, a reporting station of staff and a manager and rangers are what we call management units, and that's how we're broken up. The regions or districts, most of those districts encompass 4 to 5 management units. Bumping into the next slide, it breaks down into that, and you can see those management units. So each little place name is a central hub of operations for one of our units. So again, you see the coast is at 13 units, the mountain region is 12, and the valley region is I think right now at 9. Little misnomer, mislabeling on here, but that's just because we've veered back and forth. Is Deschutes and Cottonwood in the central and the red, the north central district are actually one unit, but have separated. It's just kind of a side note, because in several places we've combined units or separated them for several logistic regions. The East Gorge and West Gorge is another one. Currently, East Gorge and West Gorge function as one management unit, though we've had them broken apart. It just kind of depends on efficiencies and usage, and it's as we go through assessments of operations, we've made those adjustments on what's the most efficient way to operate. And so And we've went back and forth. It seems like a few times over the years with a few of the units where the same question gets asked. Any questions on any of that as far as just kind of general organizational structure, as far as how we break our parks up? Each of these units has anywhere from maybe 1 or 2 parks up to well over a dozen parks. It just depends on kind of a cluster geographically and kind of the size of the park. So we'll talk a little more kind of about that on the next few slides. But first, we're going to talk about some stats. And I think you all have seen some of these stats, but again, this just kind of illustrates some of the differences in the regions. Day use visitors, which is averaging right now about 55 million day use visitors a year. This kind of shows how that breakdown goes. And that you can see the majority of days use is on the coast, and then you have the valley and mountain regions tucked off to the side. We also have the revenue broken down there. I would caution, especially on this slide of day use, that we take that with a grain of salt, because with the new parks we brought online for day use parking, we don't have those figures, since that was a new implementation starting last fall, and these numbers were from 2025. This is going to be skewed probably when we look at 2026 numbers, and may adjust some of those percentages pretty greatly, I think, as far as amount of parks. And we'll probably see the coast right here. You see it a little bit of an anomaly, is that the valley has the majority of revenue in day use passes historically, because there's a lot of the parks in the valley that had a day use parking fee. We're going to see that probably change pretty markedly going forward, and I would guess that the coastal regional will probably have equal share to the valley as far as revenue. We go over to the overnight usage, almost just the exact same stat almost as far as overnight usage. Main difference being is a slight adjustment in usage between the valley and the mountain region. The valleys have a little higher percentage, and this has to do with the seasonality of the mountain region parks. Because of the extreme cold temperatures and snowfall, a far greater number of the mountain region parks close in the wintertime seasonally. And so that's why you'll see a little bit of that percentage bop over to the valley, because they still retain a higher level of usage through the winter with the winter season. So a lot of our mountain region parks keep some facilities open through the wintertime, but obviously it's not really tent friendly in some of those properties once you get east of the Cascades. So we definitely see low usage, and most of the majority of overnight usage in the mountain region in the winter time, especially, is attributed just the cabins and that we may have over there. Again, some revenue numbers that show kind of the split up of region and how that breaks down by revenue. Now we're going to talk a little bit about kind of how we come up with how we break up our park units and our operations. And this is kind of a nerdy slide. So if you're a numbers nerd, you might enjoy this discussion. If you're not, you can just tune me out for a few minutes. But really, we use a system, a maintenance management point system, to determine how we staff our parks, and really what the staffing level of our parks should be. And that system breaks down every single task we could or should ever do at a property. And you'll see it as our little animation scrolls through and shows some of these activities. It's everything from washing the signs, to blowing parking lots, to cleaning restrooms, doing electrical repairs. It's an inordinate amount of data, and the amount of fields in there, it really does account for everything a staff member really may have to do at a property. And then it assigns an hour value to that. And so assigns how long that task should take, how often you should do it, how often, each, times a week, times a month, seasonal. It accounts for all of that, all those duties, and breaks it down into an hour-long function. And then we'll dictate from there how many total hours a park property should take to be maintained. From that, you can determine how many FTE or full-time equivalent staff members you need to operate that park. And so that's the system we use for all our properties. We have one of these completed for every single one of our developed park properties, not necessarily all of our vacant lands or Greenway Parkway properties, but all the properties that have been developed have one of these sheets completed for them. They're not perfect. They take into account some interesting things, but they're consistent across each other. So we use this MMP system a lot. This is how we allocate our maintenance funds, is based on our MMP classification and the size of that unit compared to that. So like you would take a region's amount of maintenance management points, and then they take individual units percentage of that, and then we'd allocate their funds for maintenance dollars based on that same percentage. So we use these numbers a lot. Our folks, it's not their favorite activity to update these spreadsheets, believe it or not, because they're very intensive. And so, but it is cool in the way that it is our way to try to compare our units to an apples and apples comparison. As we look and going back to some of our earlier slides where we talked of the different the regions, the districts, and the units, and I mentioned kind of number of parks in the units, and that number could be as low as 1 or 2 parks that make up a unit. I think we all traveled recently. Our last I think field visit for commission was up to Fort Stevens, and when we toured Fort Stevens, that management unit is really functionally just Fort Stevens. It has one satellite property up at Bradley Wayside, but other than that, Fort Stevens is just one park. It's just one really large park. Whereas a unit I'll talk about here shortly, which is Lucky Mute. Lucky Mute as a single management unit oversees well over 100 properties. They're just Greenway properties, and they're not all developed. So there's a huge variety. That's where it gets kind of tricky for us to describe our actual total number of parks. We often say 254 or about 250. That answer could be as high as 350, depending on what you consider a state park. So again, just in Willamette River Greenway properties, we have nearly 100 just in that. And they're spread all over versus what we consider kind of a traditional park property. So as the general layout is, there's like 120 park properties on the coast, and probably about 70 in the valley region, and about 80 in the mountain region, with a giant asterisk on the valley region, which is the Greenway Parkway properties, and that there's actually nearly 100 of those individual parcels there. So total number, that's why we kind of say around 254. Those would be named independent park properties. But if you actually do look at our total number of parcels, it's probably more like 300 to 400 actual separate parcels, amassing probably 250,000 acres or so total, as far as total of acreage in the system. For total FTE for the agency, I think we're under roughly around 700 employees. Out in the field itself, it's around 300 permanent staff, and then just under 300 seasonal staff total. And so we'll talk about that as we get into our MU, our management unit kind of specific case studies, and give some details and show you the differences. So as we get into the discussion about different management units. I just selected one from each region to kind of share some differences and challenges of our management units and kind of show how distinct they are. Because one of the challenges I think we see a lot in our day-to-day operations is it's really hard to apply a designated standard to our units because they're very diverse. They have a lot of variety, and so I've selected some units to show that kind of help illustrate that variety. And so again, we traveled our last full commission meeting up to Fort Stevens, and you saw Fort Stevens, which is a unit made up of a single park, but that's thousands of acres. Now we're going to kind of see some differences in that. So our first unit, we're going to start over on the coast, Beverly Beach Management Unit. It's on the Central Coast, just north of Newport, about 6 miles. And Beverly Beach is a very busy park. Beverly Beach is just under 300 campsites, has over 5 million day use visitors, over 150,000 overnight visitors, makes about $1.5 million a year. Has 23 full-time employees broken up as 15 permanent staff and 20 seasonals. And Beverly Beach amasses, takes into account about 20 miles of the coastline. And in that 20 miles, there's a litany of parks that it manages. And so a topic we've talked a lot about recently with the commission and internally is we've talked about cost recovery or profitability of our units. And a distinction we've tried to make super clear is that 3 of our units are currently showing as profitable or cost, that they're bringing in more money than their budget is. And it's not saying that we only have 3 parks that are profitable. We have 3 of our 34 units that are profitable. And why that's important to look at, and why Beverly Beach is a good example is Beverly Beach Campground, the park at Beverly Beach State Park, is a very profitable operation. The park brings in, as you can see, a lot of money. It's very busy, it's full, has a very long season, but the unit is made up of 10 more properties that don't have a fee associated. And so we'll talk a little bit next about what that is. And so the campground, again, brings in a lot of revenue, but it has properties like Yaquina Bay State Park on the south end of the unit, right on the river in Newport. And Yaquina Bay, while it doesn't produce much revenue, costs the park system a lot of money. Part of that is Yaquina Bay Lighthouse. We just recently completed and part of our Oegon projects, rehab, and I would actually say a small rehab on Yaquina Bay Lighthouse. And it was probably a pretty minor remodel, focusing, you can see in that right-hand picture, focusing on the lens and the dome at the top of the lighthouse. It wasn't a complete rebuild of the facility, just a little bit of facelift on the outside and some work up there on the dome. And that project cost us right at $2 million. So just to give some scale about some of the challenge our system faces around infrastructure is the Beverly Beach unit. Again, I'll mention that has a campground that brings in a lot of revenue, has multiple historic structures similar to Yaquina Bay Lighthouse. It has the Cape Foulweather gift shop at Otter Crest. It has the Depot Bay Whale Watch Center. In addition to several day use properties that all have aging restroom facilities. And so one of the challenges we've seen is that revenue from that campground is propping up a whole bunch of parks and properties and aging infrastructure projects. And that's where it kind of falls behind and it loses some of its profitability. So some of that has been addressed recently. And again, I referenced earlier our day use parking fees system that we've changed and how that should really help. And that additional revenue will really help keep the system operating, but it just kind of dictates some of our challenges. So none of us clearly would advocate getting rid of some of these very special properties like Yaquina Bay Lighthouse or or the Depot Bay Whale Watch Center, but they certainly can put a demand on an already stressed system, trying to keep them maintained, especially in the coastal environment. I myself spent almost 12 years on the coast. I know Matt Rippey, he also worked on the coast. There's a huge challenge in maintaining buildings and facilities. And you may remember my excitement in our discussion of our donation of stainless steel hardware last commission meeting. That's why is just drawing some connection to just the challenges of keeping up with maintenance in a coastal and salt air and salt water environment is really challenging. So again, Beverly Beach is one of our special units, and in addition to all the parks, they also kind of do a lot of work in their stretch of beach, right? There's a lot of sandy beaches in that section, so they also have some patrol and enforcement work and response times down on the beach in their stretch. From there, we're going to pivot over to the east side. We're going to jump. We're going to come back to the Valley region, but first we're going to talk about Clyde Holiday Management Unit next. So Clyde Holiday Management Unit only has a third of the staff of Beverly Beach, but you can see on the map the scale of size difference between Beverly Beach and Clyde Holiday as far as what their geographic responsibility and response time is. Clyde Holiday is a very dispersed unit and has a lot of management challenges that come with that dispersed unit. Yet it has some very important and really cool properties associated to it. So including Sumter Dredge out of Baker City, the Kam Wah Chung Museum in John Day proper, and then both the Pete French Round Barn and the French Glen Hotel down in Southern Oregon. There are several campgrounds also associated to the Clyde Holiday unit, but they also are dispersed from each other, which kind of makes the management challenges. Clyde Holiday Campground, Unity Lake, and Bates are all campgrounds that are all within this one little unit. Stat-wise, where Beverly Beach was over 23 full-time staff, Clyde Holiday drops down to 12 full-time FTE, which is 7 in permanents and 8 seasonals. Only 400,000 days visitors and just under 16,000 overnight visitors, a little over $200,000 a year in revenue. But miles across unit, this is where it gets tricky. Where Beverly Beach has a very linear 20-mile stretch of highway up and down the coast, Clyde Holiday unit on a ruler is 184 miles, but the other stat I included in there, if you were to just drive from park to park, it's a 301-mile one-way trip just to touch the entrance of the parks within the Clyde Holiday unit. So this is where we get into logistic challenges. Clyde Holiday unit has been the reigning champion for us for fleet miles. I think as long as I can remember, they burn the tires off their trucks. We actually, as a funny little side note, in our fleet management program, our operations managers actually swap our vehicles around to balance usage. And so just to kind of have good governance of our equipment and get the most out of our vehicles, we'll actually start pickups over in a unit like Clyde Holiday where they get a lot of miles. And we let them work there to about half the mileage to replacement. So 50, 60, 70,000 miles. And then we actually rotate them over to the coast to be Beach Ranger trucks. The Beach Ranger trucks have a sad, difficult life and take a lot of abuse. We have had issues with our Beach Ranger trucks, literally where the frames have rusted through. So one of the things we've done to try to lessen that maintenance cost is by bouncing vehicles like this, by moving them around units. And so it doesn't mean that our poor Beach Rangers are getting secondhand cast-offs, but they take a pickup from Clyde Holiday that's still probably only 2 or 3 years old, but it's already used up half of its usable life as far as mileage goes. and then we retrofit them over to be the beach ranger vehicles for the latter half of their life. So Clyde Holiday is a great unit. Again, I think as we assess and look at our properties, there's a lot of really awesome, unique properties here. But there's a lot of geographic challenges. If you've lived or traveled much in Eastern Oregon, you're well aware of those, which is they're great properties. They're just a long ways from each other. The third unit that we're going to talk about is rotating back to the Valley region, and that's the Lucky Mute management unit. And Lucky Mute is our newest management unit. It was formed from a problem statement of trying to manage consistently our parcels along the Willamette River. And historically, these properties were broken across 3 units. And so a handful of years ago, we decided to merge those all into one management unit for consistency of operation and kind of a more intentional management strategy around the work we do on the Willamette River Greenway. So a little bit of history on the Willamette River Greenway is it was started by Governor Tom McCall. He proposed some of this legislation in 1967 to protect the Willamette River Greenway from development and to limit housing from being built along the banks of the river. The legislature passed and adopted some legislation in the early 70s doing that, and then shortly thereafter, it was actually passed into Oregon planning laws, and is Oregon Planning Goal 15 that talks about preservation and protection of the Willamette River Greenway corridor. And that corridor stretches roughly from Eugene to just south of Portland in the Willamette River, and kind of dictates and limits development along the river. So for us, what that means is during that period of time that this was established and put aside, there was a lot of acquisitions, either by purchase or donation of land to preserve the Willamette River Greenway corridor, and to provide this experience of trying to keep it wild. If you're familiar with this area, if you're from the Willamette Valley, you can understand, or if you've been on the commission long enough from when we did the tour on that not too long ago that we went out on the boats, it's almost shocking to understand just how wild it seems to run the river, because this runs through some of the largest cities in Oregon and some very populous areas, yet you can get down on the river itself and feel like you're still really out in wildlands. So it's been a success story, I think, as far as from preservation and recreation aspects. In the last several years, the creation of this independent unit has allowed us to be, again, more intentional on our development and to provide more opportunities for visitors to provide them a better experience on the river. Those opportunities range from better facilities to camp at, or where you can camp in many places along the river. We've actually started to develop a little better bivouac areas where there's tables and garbage drops and places where it's makes more sense to do so. We also have developed a little more of a robust program for offering things like restrooms, where people can have some facilities in places where it makes sense to camp as they boat up and down the river. And it's a great program. It's one that myself, every time when I get out there, I'm just astounded again at just what a great wild experience it is to be, and yet you're just still so close to town. So it's a really, really great little unit. Also has Thompson's Mills, our grain mill, State Park's very own grain producing mill that is classified as, I think, the oldest, longest operating mill in Oregon, and is just in between south of Corvallis, a handful of miles in the city of Shed. Going to talk a little bit about stats and some of the challenges of Lucky Mute unit. The visitor numbers are pretty good and impressive. You'll see that it's a mid-sized unit. Follows over 78 miles, mostly along the river. 8.6 FTE that's broken up by 7 permanent staff and 4 seasonals. One of the big challenges you'll see there is the revenue box, right? Luckmute unit doesn't produce a lot of revenue, and there's not day use parking fees associated to the parks in this unit, nor is there overnight facilities currently offered other than on the greenway itself, which really is not a place that we have a way efficiently to collect revenue. The revenue the unit does produce is mostly around ag leases. We still have several active ag leases for parcels along the river where that coincides with work that we're doing. But yet still a very important program. The Willamette River Greenway is a program we're all super proud of, and we know is very important to the state of Oregon and to the people of Oregon. Yet again, it's a logistical challenge because this is a unit that we almost fully subsidize. And so our larger campgrounds that are producing revenue are definitely helping to prop this up, but serves a great purpose, and we're always looking at ways that we can be more creative and look at new opportunities. So as we look at things like partnerships and things, this is definitely one that we've talked about if there's better opportunities. So we'll bump down and now talk a little bit. We've talked about kind of parks and structure, and so now we're going to spend a little time talking about kind of how our staff work. And you saw the MMP slide. I won't subject you by going back to it or giving you a test on how our MMP system works, but we're going to talk a little bit with the time we have left of how our staff spend our day, how they spend their average day. And so our folks, I kind of broke this down into a series of different things, and you'll see them on there. It's like the routine daily tasks or routine daily maintenance of their program, and then the visitor service, dealing with people tasks, and finally a discussion on kind of maintenance and project work. So the routine and daily tasks that a park ranger does has a huge amount of variety, and this, I mentioned earlier, our units are very diverse and separate from each other. And this is one of those places that you see a lot of that difference. And we looked at that Beverly Beach's full-time equivalent and total number of staff, and that was a pretty high number compared to many of our units. And a lot of that reason is because Beverly Beach functions virtually completely independently. Beverly Beach creates its own water out of they have their own water treatment system and microfilter plant where they actually have to make all the water that goes out to the public, and that can be 50 to 60,000 gallons a day that is produced in that campground and day use area that has to go through their system. After they make all that water, gosh dang, people go ahead and use it, and so they also have to operate their own sewer system, and because they are not connected to any utility systems. Because of the coastal environment, proximity to the ocean, the staff there actually have a complete wastewater treatment system where they run all the effluent through a series of lagoons. Then they run it through a treatment process, and what comes out is clean water, and they actually irrigate that back into the trees. So it's a really cool system, but it's pretty labor intensive to do all of that completely independently of like a municipality. Conversely, some of our parks run off city services where they actually are able to connect to city water pipes or city sewer lines. That obviously is a huge reduction in cost and staff time if you don't have to maintain that system. But several of our parks, like I said, Beverly Beach, Valley of the Rogue, Honeyman, Silver Falls do a lot of their own both water and wastewater services and the associated requirements that come with that, both permitting and certification wise. They also do a lot of restroom cleaning. When you look at facilities, again, going back to our larger park of the ones that we list in this example, the Beverly Beach crew cleans over 100 toilets a day in the summer. And that to keep up. And then if you throw in showers, you're probably talking another 30 or 40 shower units a day. So just each day in the summer. And some of those at peak time are multiple cleanings. So then that number you have to take times two. So they spend a lot of their time just keeping up with the daily demand of visitor usage, pulling garbages, cleaning facilities, doing kind of the normal wear and tear of just kind of daily tasks. Then when we go into visitor service tasks, there's also a litany of things that come with that. In the larger campgrounds, you're operating a booth or running your camp checks, which is the logistics. Our mid to large size campgrounds are larger than many small towns. Fort Stevens, the populations of Fort Stevens on a summer night exceeds the town of Warrington. That's the case in many of our campgrounds, that we may have between 1,000 and 2,000 people camping in some of our large campgrounds each night. Those campgrounds may do almost 100% turnover on a Friday and a Sunday. So you have to get all those thousands of people out and a whole new set of people in each day. So that needs some kind of care and feeding by our. So they do a lot of that as they move people in and out of the campgrounds. We also have a very robust interpretive program, ranging from our junior ranger program, where we do youth outreach, to things like evening programs, guided hikes. So do a lot of that, mostly centered around summer usage and our peak season. And then finally, in visitor service realm is kind of the seedy underbelly of this side is there's a fair amount of enforcement. Our full-time staff all are commissioned enforcement officers. We have internally our own academy that we operate and put on with internal staff that certify our folks to be enforcement officers. But even our seasonal staff, we run through at least a minimal training program on how to verbally interact with people, how to de-escalate, and how to keep the park safe. Our enforcement program is based, basically one of the simplified versions that we talk about is on the park principles, which is to protect the people from the park from the people, and the people from the people. So and sometimes that means intercession by our staff on keeping people doing what they need to do. And as far as serious enforcement, I wouldn't say that happens a ton, but our folks do a lot of dog off leash contacts and a lot of parking off pavement on the grass enforcement contacts. And I think they probably by the end of a summer are very over having those contacts, but our folks are great at doing it with a smile. And so and finally, and the last part of this we'll talk about is kind of around park maintenance and projects. There's a lot of things in a park. We talk a lot about our parks are basically engineered nature. While they look rustic and we want the experience to feel like people are deep in the woods, there is a lot of infrastructure all around them, underneath their feet, running through them, water lines, sewer lines, electrical lines, buildings, and our rangers are working on them constantly. So whether that's safety repairs, or inspections on buildings, trying to keep up with the day-to-day wear and tear, emergency repairs. I would say you would be shocked, but you may not be, but how often people back over their water stands when they're backing their motorhome into their campsite, and create little mini fountains in the middle of the campground that the rangers have to know how to fix and get back online, to things like sewer blockage and overflows, and how to control those, or failures of systems. You will rarely see people move as quick as when a sewer lift station blows a breaker and stops pumping that fluid, and the quick reaction our folks have to take to get that back online. And then finally, around everything else, our rangers do a lot of project work. So what comes to you all as commissioners most often is requests around our facility investment program, or you've approved some contracts for go bonds or pop projects. We also constantly are doing small scale projects, mostly around our preventive maintenance projects. Our units, average unit spends probably between $50,000 to $150,000 a biennium on what we call preventive maintenance minor projects, and probably between $50,000 and $100,000 in preventive maintenance major projects. And those are just kind of the day-to-day repair and replacement of things. Those projects are the minor, we consider minor projects like $25,000 and under, and then preventive maintenance major projects as that over 25,000. And it's things like replacing decks, replacing roofs, painting structures, replacing fixtures, upgrading plumbing fixtures in an aging restroom, replacing windows, all that stuff that when you look at the scale of how many thousands of buildings we have across our system, that is something that happens nonstop. And so the park staff at a unit is doing anywhere from a dozen to several dozen of these small scale projects each year. So they're constantly working on them. Whenever they can get past all their daily tasks, they jump onto a project and are trying to keep up with that. Because if they weren't doing that program, the longer term costs would be far higher. But some of these parks may have, again, this is a very simplified version, but when you look at roofs, they may have 75 or 80 roofs, buildings with roofs on them in their unit. If they don't replace a couple of those every biennium, they'll fall behind and then the building will start to fail. So that's kind of a lot of the management that they're doing constantly is scheduling and trying to work around that. Where it becomes a challenge is, and I think we've all been there, is I don't know if you've ever been on vacation and you just get your lawn chair set out and lean back in your chair, and then you hear somebody fire up a mower right beside you as you're trying to read your book. Our visitors don't love our folks doing major maintenance projects in the summer. Yet, when do we do them? And so our staff really try to cram a ton of work into the spring and fall in kind of what we call the shoulder season before prime usage. And then try to limit the major work to not happen in the dead of summer when we're busy, unless it's just completely unavoidable because of that demand and just that perception of the public. But having said that, to keep up with all these projects, sometimes they do kind of creep in. So it's again just one more challenge that our folks are very good at trying to manage and deal with as they go through. But it's a pretty much a nonstop effort, is that our rangers are hustling around behind the scenes trying to keep the property up. And kind of last thing as we wind down, a couple slides to go is I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our volunteer program. Our staff are stretched pretty thin, and one of the things that helps them is our park host and volunteer program in helping them to get things done in the parks. So a little bit of summary and just a teaser, because I think we're going to shoot to do a workshop in the fall that with a kind of more in-depth look into our volunteer program. So this is just kind of a teaser and high-level review. But in 2025, we had over 1,100 individual park hosts, totaling nearly 400,000 hours donated. If you then add in our individual event volunteers or episodic volunteers, it's almost 3,500 different individuals, totaling about 20,000 hours. Yeah. And finally, just because I'm so excited about it, we just rolled out a new volunteer management system called Get Connected, which is a system that serves the staff both internally and is our outward facing website for folks if they look to volunteer. I'm nerdily excited about it because it's such a great system. And so I'm going to show a little bit about some of their stats. That system just rolled out a little more than a month ago. We already have 2,657 active host volunteers in there, over 2,000 assignments for this year. 1,300 of them are unique, which is new. We have 237 active open recruitment posts by our units, and over 180 new volunteer profiles created since March 9th when the system went live. So it's a great system that's really going to save our folks a lot of time, which is why I'm excited about it. It's a great outward facing system, and it's what's really great is it makes it super attainable for our new volunteers as they are curious about the system. They're able to see everything from the parks themselves to a picture of what the host site would look like, to exactly what the assignment would look like and the requirements of the assignment. So really good system. We're really excited about it. And again, I think we'll kind of get more down into details about that in a future workshop. But with that, I think that's all I had. But if there are questions, thoughts, observations, Stephanie would be happy to answer those.
I have a comment. Chair Hill.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
First of all, you may question why I'm even on this commission because I went to French Glen. I had no idea the hotel was part of the state parks assets. So, but I did want to commend you on your report, JR. You did a very engaging presentation for me with a lot of new information. So I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Stephanie or JR? That was really helpful, JR. Really good numbers. I might need to steal some of those as we try to advocate for more revenue. All right. I don't see anything. Guess you're so thorough.
Speechless.
Speechless. That's really what it was.
Mhm.
All right.
Not stainless steel, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And those expensive lighthouses. All right, cool. What's next on our agenda? Let's see.
So next is our best practices workshop.
Okay.
Thank you. So Chair Hill, Director Coons, members of the commission, Katie Gothier here with the best practices workshop. Thank you to everyone who filled out this, you all filled out the survey. This is an annual survey that we take and is a requirement of the Department of Administrative Services and Legislative Fiscal Office. It's been required by the legislature since 2007, the 2007 biennium, and all boards and commissions that have the authority to hire their director are required to complete this assessment. It's then included as part of our key performance measures that are reported to the legislature annually, and then as part of our budget presentation, we include this information. So today what we're going to do is just recap briefly the reasoning behind the best practices, what those best practices are, and then we'll review the responses that you provided and discuss those. Consider whether there should be any new measures. You have the ability to add best practices if that's something you choose to do, and then we will be done with this agenda item. So looking at our process, you all took the survey independently without any discussion together, and then we will answer any questions that you have during the work session and make any adjustments that you would like before you have the opportunity to act and adopt this report in the business meeting tomorrow. And then we submit that to the Department of Administrative Services, and it's included as part of our budget presentation and posted on our website annually. The measures that we report, it will be considered the percent of total best practices met by the board. And that's calculated by the percentage of yes responses to the self-assessment. So the yes responses are any meet or exceed equal a yes. Anything that do not know equals a no. So we are going to review this report and see if you have any questions that we can clarify here. And if you would like to change your answers, then you can just let me know that. So we have 16 measures. There are 15 that are required by DAS and Legislative Fiscal Office. We've added, or you all have added one long ago that looks at property acquisition. So that's where we get to the 16. In your review, there were 8 that had questions. So we'll go over those more in depth as we go through. So looking at your responses to the 16, the first 2, there are questions about the executive director's performance expectations and annual feedback. So we'll go over those in a little bit more depth. It looks like everyone was comfortable with the agency's mission and goals being current and applicable. We'll cover the board reviews of the annual performance progress report. And then everyone seemed to be comfortable with the board, and we substitute commission, but commission appropriately involved in key communications and policy making. There are some questions about policy option packages that we'll cover in a moment, and the review of the budget. Everyone calls doing that. It sounds like you were comfortable with the financial information and audit findings being shared. And then the next 2 seem a little bit, they're very tied to the financial reporting. So we'll cover a little bit about what's meant by appropriate accounting resources and then accounting rules and financial controls. Sounds like board members are comfortable with your role as public representatives, but need a little bit more discussion around our coordination with other outside groups. And we're good on training, and we'll provide a little bit more information about the management practices and best practices. And you were all comfortable with the final your role in approving property acquisition and disposition. And if there are questions that come up while I'm going through any of this, please feel free to ask, or thoughts that you want to discuss. So when we look at the measures that had some questions, I was going to start going through there, and I think some of you who have been involved in different pieces of this may have additional feedback you want to share about that. But with measure 1, the director's performance expectations are current. It's important to remember that this review is from July of 2024 to June of 2025. So it's the last fiscal year that you're looking at. The director's position description and class specifications and work plan were reviewed in January of 2025 as part of this measure. Any questions about that one?
I have a question.
Go for it.
And I emailed you, Katie. So should I have participated in this poll or this survey, knowing that I wasn't in the position in June of 25. And if I was supposed to, I didn't realize that if I said I don't know, because for example, the policy option packages, the POPs, I've not been through that process as a commissioner with this agency. So I couldn't answer that one. I didn't realize that was going to be a negative or recorded as a no. So what do I do in that? Should my answers not be part of that survey?
Commissioner Griggs, thank you for the question. For abstain, we can record abstain. So the yes, no, and then we can just record you as abstaining for the ones that you were not here for. So your responses were perfectly fine. So going to the next measure, the second one is around the executive director receiving regular performance feedback. And the performance feedback did change over the last year as the governor's expectation for directors included regular performance feedback. We did move toward going with that 360 review that's conducted by DAS in the governor's office. And then the commission chair, though, meets every month to provide any additional performance feedback and coordination.
And Katie, to expand on that, we need to discuss if we, with Lisa's absence at ODOT this year for the first 6 months, what that review will look like for 2026, if we're reviewing Lisa or Stephanie or how that looks. So we do need to get back to the rest of the commissioners at some point with that. And then we had also discussed, just for the commission's awareness, last year the governor does is it annual or every other year? A 360 review.
I believe it's every other year.
Yeah, and so in those off years, the commission itself would do our own review, just so we had an annual review every year. There were so many commissioners coming on board at the end of last year and beginning of this year that we wanted to wait until everybody was on the commission to kind of have a discussion around what any updates to that review could look like. And so now that we do have a full commission, I think it's appropriate that we can start those discussions about any changes that we might want to make to our evaluation process as a commission, but also keeping that every other year, the 360 review that the governor provides as an option. So that's a lot to say. Like there's movement that we can have happen within this executive director performance review and how the commission wants that to move forward.
Thank you, Chair Hill. We will make sure to add that to a future agenda or work session as well. So the next measure 4, is the commission reviewing annual performance progress report. So this is the key performance measures. They're reviewed as part of our budget presentation. So the last time it was shared with the commission was June of 2024. We also submit them in the off years to DAS, and then they're posted on our website. But we can also make sure to include, when that report is done, included as a report item, and I don't think we've done that in the past. So that's something I have noted to add for the future. And then measure 7 is around our policy option packages to make sure they're aligned with our mission and goals. And this one is unique because we only do it every 2 years. The June of 2024 was the last time that we reviewed the policy option packages in preparation for submission of the agency budget. So this June, you will again start to see policy option packages. We have very few in the last 2 biennium because our budget, because we're not a general funded agency, any policy option package has to be from our available revenue. And since there hasn't been revenue, there haven't been policy option packages. The one from 25-27 that was adopted was around the new reservation system, or Rec Hub, to have funds to continue that project. So the next 4, the measure 10 and measure 11 are really around our accounting practices. Each month you receive a budget update and you approve any expenditures over 750,000. And you receive the delegated authorities report about other procurement processes that are happening in between commission meetings. For measure 11, we is really saying, are we following accounting rules and other financial controls? Our financial services department has received the Gold Star Award from DAS each year, and we just recently received it again for this year, so that indicates complying with all required accounting rules. And we follow the Oregon Accounting Manual and other required financial constraints. And as you will see on the agenda for tomorrow, we do have an audit committee that includes commission members, and you'll have the opportunity to appoint a new commission member to the audit committee tomorrow. So measure 13 is looking at how we coordinate where responsibilities overlap and work with interest groups. We do that in a variety of different ways. Some of that's been delegated to staff. There are pieces where the commission has a role. When we do some of the commission tours, you'll hear from interested groups. So the last time, in June of 2025, you met in Independence and then heard from the mayor and chamber executives about the importance of some of the park grants and heritage services that they had utilized. You also approved a new scenic bikeway that was requested by Cycle Oregon and community advocates. So there are a few times that you're directly involved in working with interested groups. And the final question for review is looking at how management practices are utilized to ensure best practices. So this is really the survey that you've all completed and this work session to discuss your feedback and if there are additional measures that you would want to have and an opportunity to look at if there are additional trainings that you would like, additional agenda, things you would want on the agenda. So that's what this meeting today is about. Any questions on any of those measures? Okay, so the next piece is you were offered an opportunity to provide comments on additional items that should be considered or areas where you need additional information. So the request was for training on staff roles, responsibilities, and purposes of them. Great suggestion, and we look forward to fulfilling that over the next few meetings. You heard today around operations and something more in depth about how our operations in parks work. In the next coming meetings, we'll have information about our other two divisions, Central Business Services and Field and Community Services. So we will do a more in-depth presentation on how each of those two divisions operate. Do you have other items that you would want to make sure are discussed or considered as part of the best practices?
Go ahead, Betty. Go ahead, Betty.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if this is the right spot for it, but just thinking about the raising the fees for camping, etc. I'm just wondering how if we could just learn more about how public's response to new rules, how they're affected by it. Sorry, I'm not articulating this very well, but once we make new rules, the public responds in some way, and I just don't have a good sense of how they can make complaints or, send kudos, and what the process is for sharing those with the commission. If that's something that we, if it's ever shared. I'm just kind of in the dark about that. So I'd love to learn more about that.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Zumi. Oh, yes, we can go more in depth when we do the Central Business Services. I think we can cover where some of that feedback goes. You will see, I'm going to email you this evening. We did receive public comments on a couple of areas that were written public comment. And normally I would put that on your seat if we were in a meeting, but I will be emailing that to you so that you have those comments. We do have a commission public comment inbox where we seek written comments before your meetings, but we can also describe a little bit about how and assessment of what types of comments we've been getting since the rules and fees have changed over the last few months. Any other questions?
I have a question. One of the most common things that I get told by my friends, family, and so forth like that, is the challenge with the reservation system. Is that something possibly we could get some feedback on how that's going and what's going on with that system?
Commissioner Condor, yes, there is going to be an RFP, or is an RFP. Sure, we can let, JR share a little bit of where we are with that right now, and then we can do a more in-depth presentation as well.
Yeah, Commissioner Hill, Director Coons, and to your question, Commissioner Condor and other commissioners, so we have been in the process of pursuing a replacement for our reservation system for a long time now. So we had actually gone through a complete RFP proposal, had selected a candidate to move forward with, and they actually dropped out of consideration right at the contract signing. So really, oh gosh, that would have been probably almost a year and a half into the process of evaluation. The reservation system is super complex, touches all parts of the agency, and so the RFP, we solicit for proposals, we score those proposals, and then we kind of wean them down in numbers, and each stage gets more complex on what they have to provide us. The final stage of our top two candidates required them to provide us a live environment that actually is built off a portion of our system that we can work in. And from that is where we had originally picked the prevailing winner. After that contract, we were unable to come to contract terms that worked for both entities. We had to go to the next phase. The second provider was not available as to move forward, so we decided that we would regroup and pause and go back out. Our current provider in the interim had offered us some options to stay with them, and we had some extensions available to our current contract, so we'd stayed with our current provider. They're also in the race to modernize, as many of the reservation systems across the country are. There's not actually that many providers across the country, about 5 or 6 total. But we are just kind of fine tuning. We actually just got the okay to go back to RFP recently. I think we're targeting to do that soon in the next handful of months, that we would reopen that process and go through that pursuit of finding a new provider. It's again, it's a long process. I think our folks are impatient for it. We have seen our current provider make some good positive changes, and we've seen some good stuff from there. But a lot of the frustration our users have, it has to do with demand. Even a good system doesn't work when your sites just aren't available. And we actually have a supply problem. We need more campsites, and because we're seeing parks are 100% booked out 6 months out, or 3 months out, or 9 months out, wherever our limit is, parks book, because it's a good problem to have. But we're especially in the summer, it's super popular. So I do think sometimes there's frustrations just from that demand on the parks, and we don't have enough sites available. But I do also know there has been some about our system, but we are hopeful that once we get engaged to that we will be on the track to having a more modernized system soon.
Okay. Well, thank you. So in other words, my answer to folks who ask me is, we're working on it.
We're working on it. Yeah, that should be live within the next few months, that we should be actively in pursuit of proposals. Yeah, just waiting to get into the summer. I think our target was right now is June, around June, that we should be going live to get new proposals.
Thank you, JR. I appreciate it.
Betty, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up for Katie, just for clarification. I know that, the opportunity to give public comment is available during our commission meetings, and then there's also the email. Are those the only 2 ways that folks can comment, or do we have a system for collecting comments given to a park ranger, for example, or is it really just limited to those formal mechanisms.
Commissioner Izumi, those are the two formal mechanisms to comment directly to the commission. We take comment a number of different ways. Broadly, we have the information center or info center phone number and email where people provide comments and ask questions, and we track all of those. I get a lot of comments directly around our rules, so we can definitely provide some information there. We also send out a survey to everybody who's had a reservation after they stay. They do a survey where they can rate the park and provide comments directly to as after their stay. So we're tracking it a number of different ways so that, and then any comments that people provide specifically during the rulemaking, we track.
Thank you.
Okay, so that is what I have. We will have an opportunity to adopt the report at the meeting tomorrow. I will send out the report to all of you later this evening. If anyone wants to change their initial responses, you can email me and let me know, or you can fill out the survey again and I can share that with you if that is preferred. So that is it for that agenda item. Unless there's any questions.
Does anybody need any more clarity about the best practices piece of that? And go ahead, Dave. I had the same questions. I think that's why we ended up with a not sure or a abstain at some point when I first started as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, Katie, do you have on record, because I don't actually remember all my responses. I know some of mine were not sure, and my not sures have been answered during this session. So do you know what my responses were for me to do amendments?
I do. You can also tell me that you're fine and I can move those not sures to, or I can send you back and I'll email you after the meeting and you can.
Okay, I feel comfortably orally telling you that all my not sures have been answered, so you can move them over. So
Great. I will do that, and then you got what else?
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next agenda item is around the rulemaking. I think we'll get to that one. Okay. So Chair Hill, Director Coons, members of the commission, Katie Gauthier here with a work session item on the background and process and authority for rulemaking. And we also have Sarah Urch from DOJ who can answer any legal questions you have while we go through this process. So I'm glad Sarah's here to help provide additional feedback if we need. So this is really just to walk through what your authority is for rulemaking and the different ways that rulemaking comes to you. In statute, you have the authority to adopt rules necessary for the state park system. And there's an additional statute that covers heritage rules. And then there's a process by which rules need to be adopted, and that's the Administrative Procedures Act. To provide just a little bit of background on where our rules are and what the rule numbers mean, I think it's helpful to understand that the chapter is 736. As an agency, we only have one chapter of rules. Some other agencies may have multiple chapters. And then each division is laid out in the next three numbers. And then finally, the specific rule is the end numbers. We have around 40 some divisions of rules. You end up adopting more changes in a couple of specific ones. So that's where you see that our fees are in Division 15 and our park rules are in Division 10. So those are the ones that you end up adopting quite a few changes to over time. And all of this process is outlined in the Administrative Procedures Act, and then DOJ has some model rules for adopting rules that we follow as well. There are about 3 different ways that we end up initiating rulemaking. It can come as a request from program staff when they identify that their rules need updating. Commissioners have requested that we consider rulemaking. Sometimes it's local governments or community partners that will request that we consider adopting rules. These are not formal requests. This is more of a staff to staff level. Hey, this rule looks like it needs some changing. It can be as a result of legislation. When there are changes in legislation or executive orders, they may require that we adopt new rules, amend current rules, rescind rules. So often you will see rule changes based on legislation. We have, after the 25 session, there is a rule change that we're going to need to consider around matching rates for certain grants. So you will see that coming in time. And the final way is a petition. So under the Administrative Procedures Act, individuals can request that a rule be amended, added, or repealed. And there's a specific process that has to go through and requirements for information that they need to provide. And if that does move forward, then there's a specific process for how the agency must respond. So in our tomorrow, you will see a petition. It didn't meet the requirements under the request to promulgate a rule, but it was after talking with this individual, we wanted to make sure that he had the opportunity to have his concerns reviewed by you and a consideration about whether to move forward with rulemaking or not. So we will go over that more specifically. Different statutes may require additional. So I'm going to go over the basic process. There are certain statutes that require some additional types of outreach or additional processes that we work through. So if you recall, we did the vehicles on the ocean shore. That has a specific statute about how we need to work with local governments if we adopt or change rules around the ocean shore. So that's an example of some unique requirements that happen. So we're going to talk through what the process is for OPRD in reviewing and adopting rules. So first in the research, the first step that we have is research and development. Staff will do the research of issues, they'll draft proposals, we discuss with interested groups, and we'll do tribal consultation at this point. Some rules don't make it out of here, or this can take as long as needed. It really varies based on if it's a quick amendment, if it's a more in-depth development of rules, it can take longer. We then move to the outreach portion of the rule. And this is where we would convene a rule advisory committee. OPRD is not an agency that's required to convene a RAC, but we very often do convene a RAC. If we don't, there's typically some other form of outreach. One of the rules that you'll consider opening tomorrow, we didn't form a RAC, but there was outreach to the grant committee that included participants that apply for the grant. So it didn't seem that we needed to create another committee. There was an existing committee that we ran proposed rules through. And then we will come to the commission and ask for permission to open rulemaking. At that point, we also share the draft rules with DOJ and get any feedback that they have on the draft rules. Next, we move to the public comment portion of the rulemaking. And this is, once you approve opening comment, we still have to file with the Secretary of State's office and go through an official process to take public comment. So we file with the Secretary of State's bulletin. It comes out monthly, so we have to file by the end of the month to get it in on the first of every month. And we open a public comment period for typically 30 days or more. We usually do 30 to 45 days, depending on the time of year and the subject. And then we have the opportunity to hold a public hearing. It's not required for most rules, but we most often do. If we didn't hold a public hearing and 10 people requested a public hearing, then we would have to go back and file a notice in the Secretary of State's bulletin that we were gonna have a public hearing. So usually we will do one to offer that as an opportunity. We issue a press release, email notices. We have an interested parties list where anyone can sign up on our website to be on our interested parties, and they'll receive a notification about rules opening. We also put it on our website, and individuals can comment online from our website. They can provide it in mail or in email. Any of those options work. Once the public comment period closes, then we can no longer accept any comments on that rule unless we open it up to comments to reopen the public comment period. So we have the opportunity to reopen a public comment period if we felt like we didn't get enough comments or the kinds of information that we needed. But unless we open it to everyone, we can't take individual comments on a rule after the public comment period has closed. Once the comment period is closed, staff will analyze the public comment, develop a response and a staff recommendation to changes on the proposed rules. We again have DOJ review those rules. At this point, it could be decided that we didn't get the comments that we need, or that the nature of the comments see that we're looking to make a more substantive change, and then we might go back out for additional public comment on that change.
And Katie, is the public comment the exact same procedure as prior? So it would be 30 days with notice? Or is
Yes, if we reopen, it doesn't have to be 30 days, but we do have to provide notice. So we have reopened comments at different times when we felt like people didn't get enough of an opportunity, or there was a change, and we didn't open it for 30 days. The 30 days is really an internal practice. There's not a specific number of days in the Administrative Procedures Act. And Sarah, correct me if I say anything wrong.
Got it.
So the next phase we move to is adoption. Staff will present the recommendations to you, and those include a link to all of the comments that were provided. We share the comments each week on our website so that people can see kind of the comments that we're getting, and then you have access to those comments as well. As a commission, you have the option to adopt the rules as they're proposed. You can make any minor amendments to those rules, minor changes, and you've seen sometimes we'll make a change based on DOJ or other reasons why we make a modification to the rules that are presented. If you want to make major changes, that would then have to go out for additional public comment. And we've done that as well. Or you can decide that you don't want to move forward at all and table it, and then those no changes are made. Once you adopt the rules, then we file them with the Secretary of State's office, and they are available on the website, and we work toward implementation of those rules, and that's really at a staff level.
Katie, can you clarify what signifies a major change versus a minor change?
That one is a little, we coordinate with DOJ to determine if we were to get to this substantive change piece, we would, if there's a gray area in there, we would coordinate with DOJ to get where their feelings are. The minor changes that we've done are, if they're in line with what public comment says, we can make those changes. If they don't, it's more of if they don't make something substantive that we would want people to comment again, that if we said we were gonna open a grant, but we're actually gonna close it, that would be a completely different thing. So we would want to get additional public comment.
And
Sarah, if you have any other feedback on that?
That was just right, Katie. I would probably just second that. If you always keep in mind sort of what your notice went out as and gave the public the opportunity to realize what they might want to be commenting on. If you were to make a change that was so different from what everyone had an idea that the rule was going to be about, then they wouldn't have really had the opportunity to comment. And so that's why you'd want to open up, giving people an additional opportunity to comment if the change that you were thinking of was so different from what everyone was imagining you were about to adopt. That's kind of like the general framework, if that makes sense.
I guess I need a little bit of clarity because if we go out to comment on a rule, we listen to those comments, and if the commission chooses to take a different direction from, let's say, we're gonna keep the majority of comments are we should keep hours open at parks 24 hours, and the commission looks at those comments, and that's what the rule before us is, but then the commission decides, no, we actually do want to just limit it to 16 hours. I mean, would that be considered a major substantive change that would go back to the public, or was that significantly reviewed by the public and the commission just chose to take a different position?
Right. I think it's going to be on a case by case basis, but generally speaking, like you said, I mean, if people understand by looking at your notice that what you're considering and that there's this possibility that there's this possibility that you might be doing one thing versus the other, and you choose to do one thing over the other. If you could imagine that if you're just a member of the public and you read that notice and you're understanding that, then that would generally be correct. You could potentially go a different route as long as like the subject matter people understand.
That's very helpful. Thank you for clarifying that. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I just want to amplify your question a little bit more for clarity. My first question is, and in case I missed it, I apologize, what triggers that is indicated that it's not a minor change? Is that what the DOJ representatives at the table is going to do? And my second question is, what if we of the commission take issue with that interpretation? What's the next step?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, so when you get to the moment in time where you're looking at potentially adopting the final rule, and you've made comments to the effect of this is what we'd like to see in the final rule. At that moment, if there was a concern that what you were potentially considering adopting was too different from the original proposal or original rule that had been filed, then yeah, DOJ would suggest that you might consider that it would be more appropriate to reopen public comment at that point.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, did that answer both parts of your question, or was there a separate?
Well, I mean, the second part of my question is, I'm just just making sure we don't get that we feel our voice is being heard, right? And versus like someone's. So I think you did answer it. Thank you.
Okay, and just to clarify, and it's not that you can't do that, right? You can't. It's not that you can't say, we've decided we'd like the rule to go in a different direction. It just means that additional process needs to be provided so that members of the public could potentially comment if they had not been aware that the rule was going to potentially go in that direction. So you could still go in that direction. You just might need to have some additional process there to do so.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, I see Betty's hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Dave, were you asking like, what if DOJ says, well, actually, keeping hours open for only 16 hours needs to go out for public comment, even though we think that it doesn't need to go out for public comment? Is that in that case, would it still need to go out? That's what I heard your question as being.
Yeah, Betty, I was just like, who recognizes that that's moved from a minor to a major change, and my guess that's why we have all council sitting with us to advise us if they feel it's a major change to what we're reviewing that came from RAC, is what I'm hearing.
So if DOJ says yes, we recommend you put this out for more comment, then that's what we should do. Is that right?
That's what I'm understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and so yeah, that's correct with Commissioner Perillo's comment there to just, I mean, you do always have advice of counsel available to you, and then it's up to the commission to make the ultimate policy choice.
Commissioner Perillo and Izumi, in the past, there have been some iterative conversations, so it might be if the commission's considering going one direction, they would hear from council that if you do this, this would be our recommendation, and you may then change and go a different direction or go that way. And so it really is a conversation during a meeting if we were to get to that point. Okay, this just wrapping up, we wanted to share some upcoming rulemaking and where we are. Approved to open rules. Last commission meeting, you opened the County Opportunity Grant Program. That grant has had a Rule Advisory Committee meet, and now they're making some changes and hope to open for public comment in May. We have requests to open, so at this commission meeting, you will consider the request to open Land and Water Conservation Fund rules, and then we would open those for public comment this spring. You are gonna consider temporary rules, which is another piece that we didn't really talk about too much, but if there is a specific need that can meet the statutory requirements, then we can adopt temporary rules. And those are in effect for 180 days. They don't go through a public comment process. They're implemented for 180 days. They can't continue, so they expire at the end of that time, or if we adopt new rules in place of those prior to the 180 days. And then, so that we will consider that tomorrow for a public improvement contracting and procurement. And then we have requests to adopt. So once we've gone through the public comment process, we are in the adoption phase, and you will consider that for the UAS use in parks and the ocean shore. And then we have a petition that you'll consider tomorrow, which is around extra vehicle fees. And we're in the research phase for 3 other rules currently. Archaeology permits, you had approved changes, and now there are a few additional changes they would like to consider. That one has a specific statutory requirement that we consult with tribes. And so we do that in a more direct manner before we bring that to you to open. So there's some tribal consultation going on currently on that. Ocean shore permits are one that we are in the research. We have a Rule Advisory Committee meeting and staff developing a draft that will then come to you in the fall timeframe for opening and considering approval next year. And then the one that I mentioned around a legislative change, local government grants, there's a change in statute that requires a specific match rate. So we will be bringing that to you in the summer or fall with a proposal for additional changes to the rules there. That's what I have. If there are specific questions or areas where I haven't covered something, I'm open.
Thank you, Katie and Sarah. That's super helpful. Dave, I see you have a hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I sometimes miss the beginning of something. Katie, at the very beginning of rulemaking, could you just re-highlight if we either as an individual commissioner or as the commission itself wants something considered, what's the step? You know, if like there's an issue that we are, that may be coming to us that we'd like it be raised and be considered, what would be the proper step for us to work within the commission? Asking this mostly as a newer commissioner, so I would know if there's like citizen advisory comes to us or something that I'm concerned enough that it needs to be considered.
So Commissioner Perillo, great question. The request, if it's a more informal request, it can be, the commission can direct us to go to rulemaking. So that can be in a formal commission process. If there's something you're curious about and want us to research, it really would just be a conversation through the commission chair. If you want us to look at researching, there are formal ways that rulemaking can be requested. So that's the petition, and anyone can do that process. But on a more informal suggestion to look at a rule, it can either be done in a commission meeting or through the commission chair.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you. We got in just under 2:45. All right, if
Great.
there's nothing else, yeah, I think what time are we meeting tomorrow? 8:30? Is that our start time?
Correct, we'll do 8:30 for the exec session, so you have a specific Zoom link for exec session at 8:30, and the business meeting will start at 9:30.
Great. And everybody has everything they need for that? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll see you guys at 8:30 tomorrow morning.